Alright, pure Enneacraft games. This is going to be game one up against branded Dogmatika, which is kind of cool to see. It's a deck I've been thinking about making with the new unreleased support because it bridges them pretty well. We're going to get to see someone making an attempt at that this game. So, Enneacraft doesn't play hand traps, basically. I'm playing Purges, but we didn't open one because we only have 3, so we just have to kind of sit here and watch whatever they do. For some reason, that's not a whole lot. I'm not sure what the combo line would have been, but it's like they have interaction and things, but I feel like it could have been a little bit stronger. Who knows? So we just go ahead and get started setting everything up. They do not pull the trigger on anything because they know they only have a few interactions live. Unfortunately for them, if they knew that every card they let us put up was interaction we can use when they try to do something later in the turn, they probably would have started using things earlier. As it stands, they wait until I try to set the Karma Cannon and go to end phase to use Branded in red to start the show. They summon Guardian Chimera, they use its effect to pop a card, they summon back an Albaz, we flip Ecto because a card was used to summon another card, which would negate the effect of an effect monster. Unfortunately, Guardian Chimera is already on the chain, so we can't negate that. They're going to pop the field spell with that, but we do get to search an Iza for later. We can negate a card, but they go super poly now that we have anything face up on board to make Dragon that Devours the Dogma. And Dragon that Devours the Dogma's effect is not negatable. It is unaffected by card effects right now. But by attempting to negate it, we get an excuse to flip up a Torimar, which is going to book the rest of their board that is not unaffected permanently. So that just loses them resources, and then because it's still the main phase, we can set this Iza that we searched. Okay, we're doing alright. They've got a bunch of cards in hand. They search a Branded Lost. That kind of sucks for us, but whatever. We go to Karma Cannon here just to turn off resources, like no Ecclesia for them, basically, was the idea. And if they activate anything in response, we have things that can respond to those. So they go ahead and use the Ecclesia here because they're like, well, that's going to get booked and I don't want it to be booked, which allows us to go Iza Leon to bounce 3 cards in hand. We're going to bounce Branded Lost. It doesn't end up mattering because you can activate Branded Lost multiple times in a turn, but we get rid of basically everything else, and they are forced to send the Dragon that Devours the Dogma because Karma Cannon says, if something isn't booked, get rid of it. Cool, so we're in a pretty good spot because that also resets our Iza, and none of the Enneacrafts are hard once on their flip effects. It's pretty neat. So they go into Albion the Sanctifier Dragon. We've got a full board. They've got 2 useless pieces. They set a card, and they go to swing at Nado, which is whatever, because that allows us to shuffle stuff from their grave back in. They didn't have a whole ton of graveyard effects, but we get rid of a few of them. Didn't really need the Anado anyways. They go Nidir Servant in main phase 2 to search some stuff, and this is going to be our first big chain. There's going to be a few throughout this video. So they use white, which allows us to trigger Proto to flip face up, pop a monster on the field. They go Mercurier to stop that. Doesn't really matter because that's Mercurier out of their hand. And then in a new chain, because the flip effect is separate from the flip condition, Proto triggers to destroy a monster on field non-targeting. So we get to pop a thing. They go Branded to add back a card. They're getting burned every time they add a card to hand, thanks to Iza being face up on the board. It only triggers once this turn, not a huge deal. They add a bunch of stuff on end phase, which triggers more Izas. And then we can use our new Iza to summon itself, so that we have it ready to bounce 3 cards in the event that they try to respond to what we're doing. So we go Inado. Inado's going to let us search the field spell. Field spell's going to let us add a couple of cards back to hand. They go to target the field spell with the Fallen and the Virtuous because they've kind of done that twice now. I think the only thing they know about Enneacraft is that the field spell will kill them. So they have been very particular about not letting us have that. Unfortunately for them, Asta negates a card that targets our card, so that negates the Fallen and the Virtuous. Enneapolis still resolves. Enneapolis can add these three back, which we can set again, and it doesn't end up mattering apparently because all they had was that to stop the Enneapolis from burning them for 5400 on end phase thanks to the 7 counters we currently have on Proto. So yeah, they burn on end phase, they die, and we've got a bunch of stuff set up either way. Cool? Cool. Alright, Enneacraft's Game 2, we are up against Exosisters. They have the new Carmiel and Batmater cards, which are both incredibly powerful and allow them to play better through decks that don't touch the graveyard like ours. You can also see that we are playing some cards that were not in the deck profile if you've watched that. We're also playing evenly. This was me trying out sideboard and going second options, and all three of these felt pretty good. Like, Thrust is pretty good. So I would say if you're building your sideboard, Lightning Storm, Thrust, evenly, not too bad. And you're going to get to see us use those here. So we're going to go into draw phase because we are going second, and they're going to start with Aratama, grab Ichiki Sayori Hime, which is just going to get them to a 4, which gets them off to the races. Like, Spirits are the best Exosisters card, outside of maybe Martha, I suppose. So they can go into the, which one is this? Michaelis. Michaelis, Carmiel, set 3, pass. That's pretty scary. And then on end phase, Carmiel allows them to set the Batmater. It would let them set anything, but clearly they already have all of the traps, which is why they set that one. Okay, well, we don't really care about the graveyards, so that's fine. And we've got Triple Tactics Thrust, so we can just fire off Lightning Storm and get it pseudo-negated by Carmiel, because they have to, because we'll just pop their entire back row. They also chain Vadis to summon 2, they get a card back, both of their Vadis targets trigger. That cuts us off of the graveyard for the rest of the turn. We don't care. So we're going to go Thrust to grab an evenly because their only negate, and we know it's their only negate unless they're playing, unless exactly this card is a solemn something, that we know it's the only negate. They see it coming a mile away, so they go Returnia, might as well banish something from the graveyard, because they still don't know what we're playing. They might think we're on, like, I don't know, Sky Strikers. I guess maybe they're assuming it's Sky Strikers if they're trying to just banish generic spells from the grave. Whatever. So they do that, and then they go into Magnifica, because Magnifica is the best card in their deck to keep if they get evenlaid. We summon a Tori first. We do not let them see that it's a Tori, and they immediately are like, okay, Magnifica, stop that. Quit right now. Unfortunately, because it was a Tori, we can negate and book their board, which they respond by going into Michaelis again. It gets booked by the Atori, so they don't have that, and now we are free to just go in, effectively. We activate Deftero, we place our Scorpion on the field, we can shuffle Deftero in to draw a card, which gets us a Deftero, which isn't our favorite, but we can at least set it for an extra disruption. Okay, we got 2 disruptions. They've got a permanently booked card. This is kind of a bricky deck, so maybe they just draw nothing. Unfortunately, they draw Exosisters Pax, which is a starter, but that does let us search something off of the Deftero and banish a random card from their hand. Hopefully the Batmater that they just searched. Let's see. Okay, no, it hits Ellis, which means that they do get to combo again. Kinda sucks. That lets us banish the Reverth to use its first effect, which you almost never use on Reverth. You always want to flip something. But because we drew a card, because we searched a card off of Deftero, we can use the Asta Pixie to kind of insulate from us getting destroyed. All they managed to get to is Carmile. They set another Vadis. Okay, that's kind of rough, but we can just flip up Arca to go into battle and kill the Carmile so that they can't negate our stuff. They use Vadis anyways. Doesn't matter here. They get burned for 1800 because stuff gets sent to the graveyard. And we're not going to touch the graveyard, so these aren't going to trigger without Carmile happening. That's the big weakness, I suppose, of the new Exosisters, is Carmile's pretty small. So if you can put just a big guy on field without activating an effect. You can just walk over it like we did there. Okay, cool. On end phase, the Vadis targets get shuffled back in because that's how Vadis works. We go to their turn. They still have starters, which is kind of surprising, and we have Astapixie as our only interaction, which counters something that would target our card. Unfortunately for them, they're also just getting burned to hell by Arca, and they don't have anything else they can do without dying to burn, so they scoop it up. Um, like, it's a flip pendulum burn deck, and it does burn stuff, which is pretty funny. It doesn't even have to come in huge chunks like from the field spell. You can literally just burn someone to death off of Isa and Arca, which is really neat. Okay, game 3. This is going to be our last one, and we are going first up against Maliss? Question mark. It's a pile deck. It's a 55, why not 60, card pile deck with Maliss and Horus and Tearlaments and just all sorts of fun stuff in here. So we're going to have to fight through a lot of various engines. Let's see what we can do. Alright, so here we go. We're going first so we can immediately set the Atori without them knowing, just to insulate our plays, and then we can go into Deft Tarot to search a card. They don't have room for hand traps in there, clearly, because they're playing 55 engine cards. So we don't have to worry about the interaction anyways. Kind of sucks because that's what we're good at playing through going first. But the hand was pretty good. Like, I can't complain about it. So we get to set up a pretty decent board alongside recursion from release. The field spell is online. We have purge to negate something. It's going to have to be enough. So they go for Horus, which lets us flip up Deftero. Deftero is always safe to flip up at first opportunity because it just banishes a random card from hand as well as getting you follow-up. So, you know, we hope to hit the King Sark here, and we would love to hit the King Sark here, but of course that's never going to happen. Hitting the Bestial's okay, though. So they go King Sark. Like, can we just talk about how the targets to send off King Sark were perfect for a second? Mudora, and they already had some frickin' Horus. God, I hate Horus. They go into Photon Lord, which can negate a monster effect, and we know that we have pretty limited interaction here, so we're saving it for what really matters, because if they just go into attack and they attack the Atori, they get booked, so we're fine with them putting big bodies on the field, and at this point I still assumed it was basically Horus. But they go Zombie Vampire, they mill a bunch of stuff, they bring back a Fenrir, which is annoying. They also have Canine in here somewhere. They mill a bunch of our cards, which the only thing that matters is release, and we already had a release in field, or in the graveyard, sorry. But having 2 is fine, it just gets us grind game if they swing over things in battle. They go for Tier Cash, and at this point I'm like, wait, what? Then they banish the Dormouse, using a Gold Sark they still had in hand, so clearly they had absolutely everything here. They banish Chessy Cat, summon out the Chessy Cat. We purge that because we just don't want them getting more materials and banishing things. I think I read it and it banishes as part of the card effect. Yeah, it's not at cost. So that's what we really wanted to stop, was them banishing things at cost to get extra value. Okay, they go into Red Ransom because they just have infinite materials. They get Malice and Underground, which allows them to extend even further. Kind of sucks. Again, we're not really pulling the trigger, though. We don't mind them having big bodies. They go White Binder and use White Binder to banish Red Ransom and a bunch of other stuff. March Hare, get the March Hare back. Then they make their fatal mistake. They activate a card in hand. They go to summon the Tier Cache. That allows us to flip up Proto Enneacraft. Proto flips whenever a monster in hand is activated and will non-targeting destroy a card on field. That allows us to check the Photon Lord, was my thought. So I immediately want to activate that, because then we hope they go to battle and start swinging. We flip a Tori, they book a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, they're a link deck, so it's not the best in the world still, but it's a start. So, They summon the tier cache, they mill a couple cards. Thankfully, what they mill doesn't really matter on this. And then Proto is going to trigger. Fun fact about the Enneacrafts, the flip effects are all mandatory, which means that they have to go on chain first over optional cards, which means that our pop gets chain blocked by them activating tier cache, which means that they can't negate, which puts them in a rougher spot. We then chainlink 3 Enneapolis to bounce the Proto back to hand so we can use it for follow-up next turn, because we're pretty sure at this point that the game's going to go at least another turn. They banish the White Binder off of MTP, which allows us to trigger Isa to flip up and bounce 3 cards, and then they go to negate that with Photon Lord. This is going to be the end of this chain. So we get to pop something on their field, they get to banish something on our field, we don't get the bounce because they negate it off of Photon Lord, which kind of sucks, but Isa's now face up to start burning them, and Maliss does pay a bunch of life already. So, here's how this is gonna resolve. They add a card, we lose Enneapolis. It's kind of funny because everyone seems terrified of Enneapolis, and even when there are cards on field that will do its job, like the Isa, they still just always hit the Enneapolis. I guess they know it's going to kill them in one hit, so they don't want to deal with that. But they summon back Whitebinder, which costs them 900, and they are paying 900 every time they search something for Isa. So they're losing life hand over fist. They go into Code Talker, they recognize what's happening, they summon back a couple of Malices and go to battle. They're still, I guess, hoping to kill us, but they can't. They're just hoping to kill us this turn because they're at 500 life and they can't search anymore, but they just don't manage to get the damage on board. They get over the Isa, and then we go to book their board, which gets negated by them sending a card off by Ally Code Talker. Not sure that was correct on them, but whatever. They break our board, but all they have now is 2 negates, and not even that, because at the end of the battle phase we can pop a card with Asta, and we pop the Code Talker's Material, which leaves them with no Malice bodies. Unfortunately, they can use the trap to bring back Whitebinder and do a bunch of Whitebinder stuff. They banish cards from our grave, which does not end up mattering, or it doesn't matter in any case because we don't touch our graveyard. So they're looking at 2 negates on board. So all we have to do is burn them for effectively any amount. We can banish a release to add back the Isa, which we can use to insulate our plays alongside a Tori. They don't know we have the Atori, so we use the Isa that they do know to try and set the Atori. They negate that because they're like, oh man, if they start setting things, we're going to lose. But it doesn't matter because the Isa isn't once per turn, so we can just do it again anyways. We go for release again because the release graveyard effect is not once per turn. You can only activate 1 release per turn, but this is activating the effect of a card in the graveyard. So they negate that because it would allow us to add something back, which doesn't end up mattering. We just use that as bait, and the bait works. So we can put a Torimar on field. We go to negate the Torimar at first convenience to book their board. They go Havness to Mill to hopefully Hail Mary try and find something. They get Lupus. It was Lupus this time. But really all of their interactions dead, and because they don't play any hand traps, there's just nothing they can do. We can search the field spell, activate field spell, and on end phase, they're going to get burned for a damage or 2. And even if not, well, no, we were screwed if we didn't kill them with burn damage here, because they have so much follow. Well, none of these 4 can be flipped, so I'm not sure what they can do at this point. Honestly, they might have just been zone locked either way. But none of that matters because they take 9,000 damage on end phase and they only had 1,200 health. So that's how we close out a game. And you guys get 3 long ones. Hopefully these help you understand how Enneacraft works a little bit better. We burn people. We set up boards that the opponent can't interact with until they're already set up. All sorts of good, fun, interesting Yu-Gi-Oh! Cool? Cool.